Jonathan Cain, the man behind Don't Stop Believin', Faithfully, and Open Arms, once admitted a truth that left audiences silent. "I wrote to keep myself from falling apart." Behind the piano notes that lifted millions of hearts was an artist who had stood on the brink of collapse time and time again, a man carrying empty spaces that only music could fill. What makes Jonathan's journey extraordinary is not only the glory he achieved with Journey or the nights he played before tens of thousands of people, but the way he turned pain into light. Every song he wrote felt like a door slightly opened, letting listeners see his resilience, his loyalty, his homesickness, and the quiet prayers he never spoke aloud. This isn't just the story of a rock legend. It is the story of a man who learned to rise from the cracks in his life and somehow transformed them into songs that endure through time. To understand that strength, we must return to the beginning, to the moment when his path had no spotlight at all. Jonathan Leonard Frege, born on February 26, 1950, grew up in the working-class household of Leonard and Nancy Frege, Italian-American immigrants who settled in Chicago. He came from a blue-collar neighborhood where winters always felt colder than reality, where wind slipped through old window frames, and where artistic dreams were often pushed aside by daily worries: heating bills, groceries, electricity. The Frege family lived simply and frugally like many working families. His parents had little to give, but they offered their children what mattered most: discipline, responsibility, and faith. That humble upbringing taught Jonathan early that some things exist only if you hold on to them yourself. From courage and perseverance to the small, quiet dream that flickered inside that little boy from Chicago. A devastating blow struck when he was just 8 years old: the 1958 fire at Our Lady of the Angels School. It wasn't only a tragedy that claimed the lives of 92 classmates and 3 nuns, it also stole from Jonathan the sense of childhood safety. The sight of friends trapped behind black smoke, the cries for help echoing through chaos, and the moment he realized he was alive while so many others never made it out. All of it became an invisible scar that followed him for life. From that moment on, his world split into 2 clear halves: before the fire and after the fire. Although the Frege family continued their modest working-class life in industrial Chicago, Jonathan was no longer the carefree child he once was. He grew quieter, more sensitive, carrying a complex inner world that few adults noticed. Almost no one understood that his silence was the way a surviving child tried to regain a sense of place after overwhelming loss. His father, Leonard Frege, was the only one who saw the change. He took Jonathan to accordion lessons, not to steer him toward a career, but to give him a path to emotional release. Music slowly became the place where Jonathan found a new rhythm of breathing, a safe space untouched by the flames of that long-ago day. As a teenager, Jonathan played accordion and piano at parties, bars, and local clubs, both to hone his craft and to help support the family. On freezing Chicago nights, as he carried his instrument home, melodies he had been experimenting with continued to echo in his mind. Those quiet years of constant work built a crucial foundation. Music was not for showing off. It was work. It was shelter. It was a responsibility that had to be honored. After graduating from East Leiden High School in 1968 and enrolling at the Chicago Conservatory of Music, Jonathan stepped into adulthood with a very different foundation from most. It was a mixture of the grit of a working-class kid, the emotional depth of someone who had survived tragedy, and the musical discipline forged through countless small gigs to help his family. The strictness of his parents, the cold Chicago streets, the nights returning from bar performances with a heavy instrument in hand, and the lingering wound from the 1958 fire. All of it combined into a silent bedrock that shaped a Jonathan Cain full of inner strength. That foundation became the launching point for a crucial transition, entering the world of professional music, where he would craft melodies that changed his life and touch millions of hearts. Entering the 1970s, Jonathan Cain carried passion and skill, but nothing guaranteed he would go far in music. It was a period when every young artist had to answer the hardest question: do I have enough to survive this? Jonathan began with things small and quiet. His first recordings under the name Johnny Lee, released through the Dial label, made little impact but taught him about studio work and how a song is built. He then made a more honest attempt by releasing another single under the name Jonathan Cain through October Records, his first time stepping in front of the public using his real name. By 1976, Jonathan took a bolder step with his solo album Windy City Breakdown, Jonathan Cain Band. It wasn't a commercial breakthrough, but it was a defining moment, proof that he could write, perform, and shape his own sound, a true artist carving out his path. Still, success did not arrive. During these years, he often felt left behind. The American music scene was brutally competitive. New bands appeared constantly, and his early work was seen more as experimentation. Many peers achieved early recognition, while Jonathan kept working tirelessly, hoping for a real chance. That opportunity arrived in 1979 when he joined the Babies, a group with clearer direction, greater visibility, and real potential to bring him closer to the spotlight. With the Babies, Jonathan contributed to two key albums, Union Jacks and On the Edge. It was his first time experiencing the seriousness of a band striving for success, and his first time having a defined creative role within a larger team. Even so, the spotlight didn't fully land on him. The Babies enjoyed some success, but never broke through strongly in the U.S. market. For Jonathan, this period wasn't about fame. It was about accumulation, stage experience, collaborative songwriting, an understanding of song structure, and above all, perseverance. Ironically, it was this combination of small wins and unavoidable disappointments that shaped him most. Jonathan learned that music wasn't just about the peaks of performance. It was about building, experimenting, getting back up, and waiting with patience for his moment to arrive. No one knew that just a year later, those seemingly modest experiences would open the greatest door of his life: Journey. Throughout the late 1970s, Jonathan Cain remained committed to the Babies, creating with John Waite and Ricky Phillips a sound that blended the romance and grit of Anglo-American rock. They wrote tirelessly, toured without rest, and lived fully for their music. But behind those bright nights on stage lay a harsher reality: unstable finances, critically praised albums that still failed to break through, and a creative direction drifting further from Jonathan's musical instincts. There were no fights, no dramatic breakup. Just a quiet conversation in which Jonathan realized he had done everything he could with the Babies. Staying meant standing still. Leaving meant stepping into uncertainty. But for an artist who had once survived ruin, Jonathan understood that sometimes you must leave the old room so a new door can open. And at the end of 1979, he left the band, a difficult but necessary decision. Jonathan had no idea that at the very moment he stood at that crossroads, people on the other side of the country had been watching his quiet rise. In San Francisco, Journey was facing a major transition. Keyboardist Greg Rowley, a co-founder, had just left the band after the Departure album in search of a peaceful life. His absence left a crucial gap. Journey was evolving toward a more melodic pop-rock sound, and they needed someone who could elevate it. During the search, Jonathan Cain's name kept surfacing among musicians. Neil Schon remembered the keyboardist with clean technique, disciplined work ethic, and positive energy from their shared shows with the Babies. Steve Perry needed someone who could write emotionally rich melodies. And Jonathan had all of it. He flew to San Francisco without knowing his life was about to shift in an entirely new direction. The audition unfolded in a way he never expected. No technical pressure, no complex tests. They simply played together. Jonathan sat at the piano, placed his hands on the keys, and let emotion guide him. Within the first few chords, Steve Perry smiled, the smile of someone who had just found what was missing. Neil Schon was stunned by how Jonathan caught each of his guitar phrases, creating the emotional harmonic layer Journey had been searching for. "We knew right away," Perry said later. "From the very first moment, we knew it was him." What secured Jonathan's place wasn't just his technique. It was the way he played as if telling a story, with the heart of someone who had lived through real loss. His warm chords, the piano lines that breathed, the deep musical intuition, all of it made him the perfect fit for Journey's new direction. After the session, there was little discussion. Neil walked over and asked, simply and sincerely, "Would you like to join Journey?" In 1980, Jonathan Cain officially replaced Greg Rowley, opening the brightest era in Journey's history. He had no way of knowing that only months later, the very notes he played that day would form the foundations of Don't Stop Believin', Open Arms, Who's Crying Now, Faithfully. Songs that not only defined the band's dominance of the 1980s, but became part of the world's collective memory and Jonathan Cain's most enduring legacy. Joining Journey was like stepping through a door Jonathan had unknowingly been knocking on for years. He arrived at a moment when the band was searching for a new identity, and his musical sensitivity, Chicago-bred discipline and quiet depth shaped by past trauma, allowed him to fit in naturally. Only months after his arrival, Journey began a pivotal project, one none of them yet knew would change the landscape of American rock. Escape was born out of that furious creative energy. For Jonathan, it was not just his first album with Journey, it was where everything he had built through the 1970s finally found its voice. Late-night writing sessions became the moments he learned how to merge with the band's shared language, the language of big melodies, raw emotion, and a kind of rock that was powerful yet full of hope. In the studio, Jonathan never tried to prove himself. He let the music speak. That quietness became his strength. With just a few chords on the piano, the atmosphere shifted. His melodies felt familiar yet pushed the band into new emotional territory. Steve Perry sensed it immediately. So did Neil Schon, both realizing that Jonathan was opening the path to Journey's most luminous era. When Escape was completed, they didn't just have a new album, they had a declaration. And in that declaration, Jonathan's stamp was unmistakable. Piano lines that softened a rock anthem, synth harmonies that expanded the emotional space, and above all, the sincerity of a heart that had endured much. The miracle was that these melodies didn't just elevate Journey, they created a new chapter in popular music. The explosion of Escape didn't just move Jonathan from replacement member to creative soul, it proved that every quiet year he had spent, Chicago bars, small studios, had led him exactly where he was meant to be. Jonathan Cain was no longer just a gifted musician. He had become a writer of the world's cultural memory. After Escape's explosion, Jonathan Cain entered a life trajectory even he couldn't have predicted. Journey was no longer a rising rock band. They had become a cultural phenomenon. Tens of thousands filled stadiums, Don't Stop Believin' soared like a ritual, and every night the world became a sea of light. But while those songs lifted Journey to greatness, Jonathan found himself facing the opposite, the quiet emptiness behind the spotlight. Fame demanded a cruel price. Endless touring kept him away from home for months. Exhaustion built with every flight, hotel, and stage. He realized that between the roar of tens of thousands and the silent room after the show lay a loneliness capable of breaking any heart, even one as battle-tested as his. It was in that life of contradiction that Faithfully was born, not in a moment of inspiration, but during a long, silent night on a tour bus rolling across America. While everyone slept, Jonathan sat alone, watching the streaks of highway light rush backward as if time were pulling him away from everything familiar. He opened an old notebook where his father had once written simple words of encouragement. "Don't stop believin', son." Those pages now held a different weight. The growing ache of missing home, the fear that fame could fracture the private world he fought to protect. Jonathan placed his hands on a small keyboard, not intending to write, only wanting to find a way to say he was still trying to keep his promise to his wife. Then a melody came, soft, simple, almost whispered. He played each chord like speaking to himself. In just 30 minutes, Faithfully arrived fully formed. No revisions, no polishing. Jonathan always said he felt the song had been given to him, waiting somewhere for the right moment to enter the world. The next morning, when the bus stopped, Jonathan handed the rough demo to Steve Perry. Perry listened without speaking. His silence wasn't confusion. It was recognition of rare truth in every word. When he finally spoke, he said only one small sentence, but it confirmed everything. This is special. In the studio, they kept almost everything from Jonathan's demo. Steve Perry sang as if giving voice to Jonathan's heart. Neil Schon let his guitar cradle every breath of the song. No one wanted to change a thing. Any extra detail would break the fragile honesty at its core. Faithfully was not just a husband's vow carved out of life on the road. It was the sigh of every artist living on the thin line between fame and loneliness. A small bridge between two worlds that never truly meet. The blinding stage where crowds lift you high, and the empty room where silence reveals every hidden longing. Jonathan needed only half an hour to write it, but the world needed decades to love it, and then love it forever. But music, like life, never allows anyone to stay on one peak. As Faithfully spread across stadiums, Journey stepped into their next challenge, Frontiers, 1983. If Escape was the doorway into glory, then Frontiers was the threshold where the world waited to see whether they could hold on to that brilliance. The pressure seeped into every corner of the studio. Jonathan, who had just poured his heart into a masterpiece, now had to return to the cycle. Keep writing, keep reinventing, keep shining. No one demanded it of him, but the expectations of millions of fans made every note he laid down feel heavier. Mornings working on Frontiers often began with an odd silence, each member of Journey sitting in a different corner, lost in his own thoughts. Neil Schon searched for a fiercer guitar sound. Steve Perry pushed his voice into new emotional territory. And Jonathan stood between them like a bridge, trying to keep Journey's musical thread intact without losing his own heart. They didn't always meet at the same point. And from those small differences in direction, in emotion, in expectation, cracks quietly began to appear. No noise, no drama. Just longer pauses between conversations, recording sessions that dragged on, and the lingering feeling that the shadow of escape hung over everything. Even so, Journey pushed forward. Frontiers succeeded, concerts still sold out, and their music continued to dominate the nation's radio waves. But behind the explosive performances was a weariness only insiders could understand. For Jonathan, it was the nights spent alone on the tour bus, watching the stadium lights fade behind him and wondering if there would ever be a moment when he was allowed to stop, breathe, and return to the quiet peace he once knew. That was Journey, radiant yet fragile, triumphant yet full of swallowed sighs. And in the midst of all that motion, Jonathan kept doing what he had learned as a boy, playing bars in Chicago. Place his hands on the keys and let music hold him together before life could pull him too far away. After years of brilliance laced with exhaustion, Journey began to enter a period of stagnation. Creative pressure, divergent musical visions, and the personal burnout of each member pushed the band into a long silence. With the stage lights temporarily dimmed, Jonathan Cain had to confront his own life without the applause to fill the quiet. The 1990s opened with new steps. Jonathan kept writing, searching for projects that restored the balance he'd lost in the whirlwind of fame. Part of that journey led him into Bad English, where he reunited with John Waite and Neil Schon to rebuild their careers in their own way. There was success, there was failure, but most importantly, Jonathan maintained his creative rhythm during a time when he could easily have been swallowed by Journey's collapse. Then, in 1996, something no one expected happened. The legendary Escape lineup reunited. Perry, Schon, Cain, Smith, and Valerie sat together again. The very men who had shaped the band's greatest triumphs in the early 1980s. Time had worn many things down, but the way they found each other in music had not changed at all. They recorded Trial by Fire, an album with a distinctly mature spirit, as if they were finishing a story left unfinished many years earlier. The reunion didn't last long. Steve Perry's health issues forced the tour to be canceled. But for Jonathan, it was a chapter that closed softly, gently, and with deep respect. Journey continued with a new lineup, and Jonathan remained the guardian of the band's melodic soul. He stood behind countless performances and recordings, quietly ensuring Journey moved steadily along its long road. At the same time, he dug deeper into his personal world through solo instrumental and piano albums, wordless pieces that felt like journal entries from someone seeking balance between duty, memory, and loneliness. And in a way that felt like a full-circle return, beginning in 2016, Jonathan embarked on a new musical path, contemporary Christian music. Not a sudden turn, but the culmination of a lifelong search for peace. Marital struggles, loss, years of exhausting touring, all of it led him back to the faith he had first touched as a child after the 1958 fire. Albums like What God Wants to Hear, Unsung Noel, More Like Jesus, and Arise carried a spirit far different from Journey's. Warmer, quieter, marked by the grace of someone who had fallen many times but kept choosing to rise with kindness. Jonathan recounted his entire journey in his memoir, Don't Stop Believin'. Not a simple retelling, but a confession from a heart filled with cracks that still turned toward the light. The book earned praise from Rolling Stone and became a Publisher's Weekly bestseller, proof that his story did not belong merely to Journey, but to anyone who had ever walked through pain to rediscover themselves. In the years that followed, Jonathan moved between two worlds that seemed far apart. A journey that continued touring tirelessly with its new lineup, and a church sanctuary where he stood behind the keyboard on weekends, leading worship through music. These two worlds didn't conflict. They completed each other. One Jonathan shining in arena rock, another humble and reverent in a house of faith. Both were his truest forms. One evening in 2022, a small moment thrust him back into the storm of public attention. Jonathan performed Don't Stop Believin' at an event with political overtones, a night he saw simply as playing the song he wrote, at a place he attended because of family and personal relationships. But once again, music was pulled into forces larger than the artist. The image led to misunderstandings that Journey was taking a political stance, though the band had avoided such lines for decades. Neil Schon objected, not out of doubt toward Jonathan's intentions, but out of fear that Journey's legacy might drift away from pure music. For Jonathan, the moment was both light and profound. Light because it wasn't a scandal he created. Profound because it showed how even the most beautiful songs can become entangled in unintended narratives. As always, Jonathan refused to be defined by conflict. He continued writing worship music, continued performing with Journey, continued living according to his beliefs. A man who had survived childhood tragedy, arena rock glory, tour bus loneliness, and the healing power of faith, still quietly placed his hands on the keys, creating melodies that reached places words could never touch. If the storms on stage left him exhausted, then the turbulence in his private life carved wounds that took far longer to heal. Amid all the noise of fame, Jonathan realized that the only thing capable of holding a person together was not the lights or the cheering, but the relationships closest to the heart. Those moments where a man must face himself, unable to hide behind music or work. His first marriage came at a time when he was still a young musician, struggling to balance ordinary life with the whirlwind of success that had just engulfed him. Cain McClure brought a soft glow of youth into his world, a light Jonathan clung to whenever the stage lights became too blinding. But that glow was too fragile against the increasingly brutal touring schedule. In those suffocating nights of homesickness, as the tour bus sped down endless American highways, Jonathan wrote faithfully, not to create a hit, but to hold on to something slipping from his hands. A promise to the woman he loved. The song lived forever. The marriage did not. It left him with his first lesson about the cost of fame. But people reveal their deepest corners only when they try to rebuild a life that has once cracked. With Elizabeth Fullerton, Jonathan was no longer the young, storm-swept musician. He became a father, a husband of a full family, his first true home to return to, instead of hotel rooms with locks changed every night. Madison, then the twins Liza and Weston, became the center of Jonathan's world. For as many years as he had stood under stage lights, he now learned how to stand in a living room, where the sound of small footsteps running to hug him mattered more than any applause. An artist's heart is always pulled in two directions, one toward family, the other toward the artistic path that never stops. In those years, Jonathan composed, recorded, toured, and raised children. These parallel forces gradually created a distance no one wanted. The second marriage ended quietly, like a door closed gently so as not to hurt the children who still needed both parents. This pain was different. No longer the regret of youth, but the fracture of a grown man who had tried his best. Most people lose faith after having their heart torn twice. But Jonathan was different. He had lived his entire life through music, and music had taught him that melodies which seem like endings can still become beginnings, as long as the one writing them is brave enough to place his hands on the keys again. Paula White entered his life at the exact moment he needed it most, when he stood between two deep chasms, mourning his old family and searching desperately for a spiritual direction. Paula was not just a partner. She was a compass guiding Jonathan back to the place where he had once lost himself. Faith. With Paula, he found a love that was not loud but steady, not fiery but sustaining. And from that love, Jonathan stepped into the final chapter of turning pain into music, a chapter anchored not by the stage, but by faith. His love with Paula did not blaze like young passion, nor did it carry the heavy responsibilities of raising 3 small children. It arrived more gently than that, like a hand placed softly on the shoulder after years of carrying weight alone. Paula did not pull Jonathan away from Journey. She simply showed him that beyond the applause, beyond the packed arenas, there was another kind of sound. Lower, deeper, like the whisper of his own soul. And from that moment, Jonathan's music began to change color. It no longer reached for commercial peaks or chased the next hit. It moved inward, toward the place where old wounds glowed like embers. This love did not erase the losses of his past, but helped him see them differently. The first woman left him with a longing that became faithfully. The second left the memories of a family he fought to preserve. And Paula, the last, did not replace anyone. She simply helped him piece together the fragments that had gone untouched for far too long. Jonathan learned that pain is not something to bury, but something that can become light if we are brave enough to face it. He wrote worship music not to escape the past, but to walk beside it with greater gentleness. Albums like What God Wants to Hear and More Like. Jesus carried the voice of a man who had loved, lost, risen, and finally found a place where his heart could lie down and breathe peacefully. Because when he looks back on his life, Jonathan Cain does not see 3 separate marriages. He sees one continuous journey, the journey of a heart that kept trying to love again. Despite having cracked, broken, and hurt so deeply, it once seemed there was no room left for hope. And it is precisely those cracks that quietly and steadily became the places where light entered, shining onto every key he touched. So that in every song, listeners could feel what he carried his whole life. That love, even when it wounds us over and over, remains the starting point of every beautiful melody, and the place where Jonathan Cain always found himself again, honest, fragile, and profoundly human. When a person has endured enough pain to understand the value of peace, and has climbed enough heights to know the cruelty of stage lights, what remains is not applause. What remains are footprints, what people remember when the final note fades. Jonathan Cain's legacy does not lie in numbers or charts, though he has plenty of those. It lies in how his songs became shared memory for generations. No one needs him to recount his achievements. People hear them every time Don't Stop Believin' echoes through a stadium, at a graduation ceremony, or in the final scene of a film. The song became the best-selling track in iTunes history not because of marketing, but because it found a place deep inside the public's heart, a place reserved only for melodies born from truth. And no one needs to be told he is an essential part of Journey's sound. All they need is to hear the piano prelude of Who's Crying Now or the synth lines supporting Steve Perry in Open Arms to recognize his fingerprints instantly. That is how he existed. Never overpowering, never showy, but utterly indispensable. Friends and bandmates, those who traveled thousands of miles of touring life with him, often spoke of a Jonathan who was soft-spoken but meticulous, a man who never raised his voice but could turn a simple chord into a recognizable emotion. Steve Perry once said that there were moments in the studio when Jonathan played a small chord progression, and everyone in the room instantly knew the song had found its soul. And his family, the ones who know him not through lights, but through quiet evenings in the kitchen, remember him as the father who carried a tiny keyboard on vacations so he could play lullabies for his children. A man who, whether standing before tens of thousands or just one child, remained equally gentle. The major honors, from his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame to his induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, are simply the world's way of saying thank you. But the true legacy lies elsewhere, in the fact that children born long after Journey's golden era still seek out faithfully, still choose Don't Stop Believin' as the soundtrack of their youth, still fall silent when they hear the keyboard played by a man who began making music at 8 years old as a way to escape his own pain. And yet, Jonathan's journey was never as dazzling as the stadiums where his music echoed. Beneath the hits that became generational memories were the uneven roads few ever saw, projects that fell short of expectations, years when Journey struggled through lineup changes and creative differences that forced the band to pause and rediscover who they were. But it is precisely these quieter, heavier notes that reveal the real value of Jonathan Cain's legacy. A legacy built not only on glory, but on endurance, patience, and the quiet steps taken when the spotlight dimmed. Jonathan Cain never set out to become a legend. He simply tried to remain true to his music, his family, and his faith, and everything else. The part the world calls legacy found its place over time. The songs that made the world cry were often written in his most vulnerable hours, when a wounded heart had to choose between breaking apart or turning its pain into melody. But even as those works grew far beyond him, Jonathan never allowed them to obscure the road ahead. Because he understood something not all artists learn. Glory is what stays behind you. A person must keep moving forward. He no longer chased impossible peaks. He chose a rhythm closer to his truest self, quieter, clearer, and more deeply rooted in the faith that had carried him from the 1958 fire all the way to this moment. Journey still carried him through stadiums lit in silver light, but his heart found peace in the weekend services at City of Destiny, where he and Paula served their community through music and prayer. Worship music didn't enter Jonathan's life as an abrupt turn, but as a river finally finding its rightful path. At Addiction Sound Studio, the creative space he built as a second home, Jonathan spent most of his time crafting new worship songs, shaping each melody as though it were his answer to a life that had tested him too many times. He still performed with Journey, still toured, but no longer forced himself to run at full speed. At this age, he understood that health cannot be taken lightly, that every stage should be worth stepping onto, not an obligation. This slowing down was not retreat. It was the maturity of someone who had endured enough loss to understand the value of peace. And perhaps the most beautiful part is what never changed. Jonathan Cain still composes. He still sits before a keyboard like the boy from Chicago he once was, still believing in the power of a small melody to lift a weary soul somewhere out in the world. The Jonathan of today does not try to become a legend, nor does he live in the shadow of his immortal hits. He simply lives more gently, more honestly, continuing to write the kind of music that illuminates places untouched by light, just as music has long illuminated his own life. In this quiet rhythm, we see the core truth about him. No matter how many crossroads life opened, no matter how far fame carried him, Jonathan Cain always returned to one place: music. Not the kind welcomed by thunderous cheers, but the kind written in silence, giving him courage to survive childhood trauma, strength to endure loneliness on the road, grace to love again, and faith to return to his spiritual roots. When people look back on the life of Jonathan Cain, they see more than just Journey's brilliant keyboardist or the co-writer of Don't Stop Believin', Faithfully, and Open Arms. They see a man who learned to walk through pain with kindness, an artist who accepted failure as an essential part of creation, a human being who rose after every test of the heart and kept walking with quiet persistence. This story touches others, not because it is legendary or perfect, but because it is true in the same way a human life is true, moving through cracks to find itself again. And in the end, the truth about Jonathan is not found in giant stages or immortal records. It is found in how he lived, loved, believed, and wrote. A life that began in fire, traveled through darkness, and ended in light. A journey not just to hear, but to feel. That is Jonathan Cain's most beautiful legacy. Jonathan Cain's story may make you pause for a moment because of a familiar melody, a loneliness you've once felt, or simply because you want to follow his journey to the end. If something in this story touched you, leave a small signal, a like, a comment, or even just an emoji that fits the moment. These little interactions not only help the story reach others, but let me know that honest, soulful content still has people who want to listen. And to make sure these emotional life journeys, these stories behind timeless songs, never slip by, don't forget to follow the channel. There are many more stories to tell, many more emotions to share, and hopefully, somewhere out there, each video will find exactly the heart that needs to hear it.